Hello everyone, welcome to Parashat video on Parashat Shoftim. This might be our last summer Parashat video, and really Hazaku Baruch for those of you that went with us throughout the entire summer. Sometimes I would ask kids about certain parashiyot, and they would say, no, we don't know this one because it's a summer one. And you know that you guys went through the entire summer and learned through all the summer parashiyot. So Hazaku Baruch, because summer parashiyot also matter and they count, and it's part of our great Torah. And Be'ezrat Hashem will finish the entire Torah together, and we'll have an understanding of all of our parashiyot. And Be'ezrat Hashem, this is just a drop in the bucket. These videos are not the end. I don't say everything in every parasha. Of course, it's up to you to continue learning mifarshim and learning in depth. And Be'ezrat Hashem, you'll take this only as a starting point, and Be'ezrat Hashem to continue learning more and more. So Parashat begins with the words Shoftim v'Shoterim. Parashat Shoftim, literally Shoftim means judges, and Shoterim is officers. Torah commands us that in every city you have to have judges to judge what's right and wrong. So that means if someone has an argument with someone, let's say in money, so they have to go to a judge. And Shoter is officers to make sure that these things are actually followed through. I'll just going to give you a simple example that happened today with something. So a guy came to me and he said that there was a bunch of friends going in a car, and let's say 5 friends paying $50 each for a $250 car ride. Then one of them said at the end, "Oh, I'm not coming." So now it's 5 people, it's 4 people for a $250 car ride. Does the guy have to pay or they have to pay? Which means that these things you have to ask a rabbi. In the olden days, you'd go to Bet Din for such a question, and they would tell you what to do, and the shoter, the officer, would make sure that the person pays. So it says you have to have them in all of your cities. Now the pasuk says this shofet, who's a judge, he cannot mess up the judgment. He cannot show favoritism, and he cannot take bribes, because bribes blind the eyes of tzaddikim. Now this means when someone takes a bribe, even if they want to do the right thing, they're blinded. They don't see the right thing. Now the pasuk says, make sure you judge righteously. And that's the beginning of the parasha, which tells us to make judges and also officers who enforce the judgments, but the judges have to be honest and can't take bribes. Now pasuk says that when you slaughter an animal for a korban, you make sure that animal does not have a mum. A mum is called a blemish, and it has to be totally perfect animal without anything that makes it pasul to be a korban. Next part of the parasha is someone who worships idols. Pasuk says if someone worships idols, they get the death penalty. Now, again, we've seen this many times in Sefer Devarim, where it tells us about worshiping idols. Halakha says that if they find out that he worshipped idols. Now, how do they find out? Pasuk says with 2 or 3 witnesses. Now, of course, it's really 2 witnesses, but 3 would be the same thing. And if 2 witnesses say that he worshipped idols, halakha says we assume he's guilty, and he gets the death penalty. And what he gets is the punishment of sikila, which means he gets stoned. Now the pasuk says that he only gets punished if it's 2 or 3 witnesses. Lo yumat al pi ed echad, but he doesn't get killed if it's only with 1 witness. Good. Next part of the parasha is called Zakin Mamre. Now, Zakin Mamre means a rebellious elder. Now, this Zaken is a Tamid Hakam. He's fit to be on the Bet Din. Now, in the times of the Torah, according to Torah law, there were 3 types of Bet Dins. There was Bet Din of 3, Bet Din of 23, and Bet Din of 71. Now, the Bet Din of 71 was called the Bet Din Hagadol. They were in Yerushalayim by the Bet HaMikdash. So the halacha is that if Bet Din Hagadol in Yerushalayim rules a ruling, and this judge says, I'm not following them, so the halacha is he gets the death penalty. Now, why does he get the death penalty? Because he's ruining the authority of the Bet Din. Now, it only applies if he's also a Hacham, because since he's a Hacham, we're worried that people are going to follow him. Meaning, if the guy's a nobody, then we're not worried that they're going to follow him. But this person's also a Hacham, and he's being rebellious against the Bet Din Hagadol, so therefore the halacha says we give him the death penalty because we have to follow the authority of the Bet Din Hagadol. Now we come to the next part of the parasha, which is the subject of making a king. So the pasuk says when you come into Eretz Israel and you're going to say, I want a king like all the other nations have a king. So the pasuk says you're allowed to have a king. Mikerav ahecha, he has to be Jewish. He has to be from your brothers. Now we're going to see, in the time of the second Bet HaMikdash, there was a king named Agrippas, and Agrippas was not fully Jewish, and they were punished for having him as their king and telling him, don't worry, we love you anyway. And pasuk says over here that the king has to be Jewish. You can't have someone who's not from your people. Now the pasuk says these are the responsibilities of a king. He cannot have too many horses. And not only that, but he cannot have too many wives, and he can't have too much gold and silver. Now the reason is because we don't want the king to use his position to just get a lot of wealth and a lot of stuff, and to be, just to do it for himself. So the pasuk says that when the king is on his throne, you have to write Mishneh HaTorah Hazot. Now Mishneh HaTorah Hazot is, some say, means the Sefer of Devarim. Right? That means you have to have the Torah that he holds with him always, and he carries with him. This way it's a reminder for him to follow the mitzvot. Again, he has to remember why he's king, and he's doing it for the will of the people and to do the right thing. So pasuk says that when we have to make sure that he does not become haughty. Don't make him not be a big shot. And so he does not sway from the mitzvot. And if he does all of this the right thing, he will live long on his kingdom, him and his children. Now Rashi says, we see from here that if a king has a son who is fit to be king, we give it to his son first. This is called Yerusha in Malchut. Yerusha means inheritance. That means, like we see this by David HaMelech. Right? David HaMelech's son, Shlomo, became king. So that's the way really it's supposed to be. If the king's son is fit to be king, he gets to be king. So there's a whole rule of what kings are allowed to do, so the king doesn't become a big shot and haughty, and he follows the right the mitzvot the right way. Now the pasuk says like this: the Kohanim and the Leviim, all of Shevet Levi, do not get a portion in the land. Now we've mentioned this, that they get 48 cities and they live all over Eretz Yisrael, but they don't get one big portion. The reason is because they are meant to serve Hashem, and they don't have a portion where they're going to plant and plow and live like everyone else. Now the pasuk says because the Kohanim don't have a portion, they get certain gifts from the people. Now they serve in the Bet HaMikdash, and their gifts are, they get 3 things from an ox or a sheep: zeroa, lehayim, and keval. Zero is like the foreleg, the jaw, and the stomach. Every animal, you have to give the Kohen a piece of this animal. Not only that, but you have to give the Kohen teruma. Teruma is the 1/50th of your produce. You have to give to the Kohanim. Not only that, you have to give them something called Reshit Hagez. Reshit Hagez means the first shearings of sheep. That applies even today in Eretz Yisrael. That when you have a sheep, you have to shear the first shearings and give it to the Kohen, because the Kohen is chosen to serve to serve Hashem in the Bet HaMikdash. That's why the Kohanim have a special status. Now, the next, the pasuk tells us that there's something called prophecy, but even though there's something called a Navi comes and he tells us something that Hashem told him to tell the people. But even though there's a Navi, you should not use Nevi'im for your own purpose. Like, for example, I want to know who's going to win the game this week. So I ask a Navi who's going to win. Or I ask someone who sees the future, should I go into this business or not? Pasuk says, don't do that. And it tells us a Pasuk, Tamim tihiyeh im Hashem Elokecha. Be honest with Hashem. Be wholehearted with Hashem. Don't worry about the future. Don't worry about all these things. Just do the right thing. Now, I'll read the words of Rashi. Tamim tiyeh Hashem Elokecha velo tachkor achar ha'atidot. Don't try to analyze the future. Ela kol ma sheyavo alecha. Whatever happens to you, kabel b'timimut. Accept wholeheartedly. So just serve Hashem and don't worry so much about what's going to be in the future, and don't try to use Nevi'im for your own purpose. Now, of course, there were Nevi'im that the purpose of a Navi was Hashem sends a message through Navi, and he comes and he tells it to the people, and the people have to improve based on the message of the Navi. But that's not to be used for your own purpose. Now, the Parashat continues with the subject of an Ir Miklat. Ir Miklat is someone who kills by mistake. So the halacha is, if he kills by mistake in a way that he was a little negligent, so he has to run to an Ir Miklat. There were 6 of these Arei Miklat. We learned it in Parashat Mas'ayah, and the person has to remain there until the Kohen Gadol dies. Pasuk says that you have 3 of them in Israel, 3 of them in Eved HaYarden, in Jordan, where the Reuven, Gad, and half of Sheva and Asher were, and you have to make signs on the roads to make sure people know where to go. So that's the subject of the Ir Miklat. Now, the Ir Miklat, if you leave the Ir Miklat, then the Goel Hadam, the relative of the person who was killed, is allowed to kill the murderer. So therefore the murderer better stay in the city so he has protection. Now, Pasuk says, if someone kills someone on purpose, right away they go to the Ir Miklat, but then they try him, they bring him to court, they judge him, and then they kill him if he's guilty of killing on purpose. Next part of the parasha is something called Hasagat Givul. Now this means, according to Rashi, let's say you and your neighbor have a piece of land. So you have a fence. So in the middle of the night you go and you take your fence, and you call the fence guy, and everyone's sleeping. The fence guy goes and he moves your fence 2 feet into your neighbor's land. Now you have you have enough yard to play football. Now the pasuk says, even though that's automatically stealing, but it's another isur of hasagat givul, is like moving the boundary of your friend. So there's a special isur in moving the boundary from of into your friend's property. Now, after that, the pasuk says that, like we've said, what if one witness is not valid, but two witnesses come and say that we saw Reuven driving on Shabbat? So in the time of the Torah, the person they're trying to get the person punished. Well, let's say two witnesses come and say we saw Reuven worship idols, so now Reuven's going to get killed. So now, what if these two witnesses are lying? Well, it doesn't matter. We believe two witnesses. Well, now what happens if two other witnesses come and they say, "Oh no, you see these two witnesses? How could they say that Reuven was worshiping idols on that day at that time? They were with us. They're lying, and they prove they were lying. So the halacha is that these two witnesses, they get ka'asher zamam. They're called edim zomemin, false witnesses. And they get whatever they try to do. If they try to get the guy killed, then they get killed. If they try to give the guy malkut, lashes, they get lashes. If they try to obligate the guy money, then they have to pay money. So if they're found to be false witnesses, then they get the punishment that they tried to get. This doesn't always apply. There are a lot of rules of edim zomemin. Next part of the parasha is when you go out to war and you see the nation is very mighty. Pasuk says, "Lo tira mehem." You're not allowed to be afraid. Now, this is unbelievable. Now, the rabbis say that this is a mitzvah in the Torah. When you have trouble and when you have a crisis, you're not allowed to be afraid. You have to trust in Hashem. Human nature is to be afraid, but part of our view on life and our emunah and bitachon is that if we have a problem, we believe in Hashem. It doesn't automatically mean it's going to come out good, but we don't. There's nothing to be afraid about. So the pasuk says that when they come close to war, so now they make an announcement. If anyone, they say like this: if anyone built a house and did not yet live in it, go home. Now the reason why they're saying is because he's going to go, this person, since they built a house and did not yet live in it, so they're not going to fight with all their strength. They're going to go like to the back. They don't want to die. They didn't live in their house yet. So they're going to be nervous in war. So we don't want these people in war. Same thing with someone who planted a vineyard, grapes. So if he planted the vineyard and did not yet get to enjoy it, go home. Someone who just got married, but did not yet move in with their wife, did not do the final stage of marriage. So same thing, we send this person home because we don't want these people to ruin the morale of the other soldiers because they're not going to fight wholeheartedly because they're going to be always very cautious. They're going to want to go back home. So the pasuk says that lastly they would announce if someone's afraid, go home. Gemara says two explanations of this. One explanation is if they're afraid of war, or number two is if they're afraid of mitzvot or averot that they have. If they're afraid of averot, they go home. That means that according in the Torah's view of war, only the most righteous tzaddikim of soldiers get to go to war. Now, last part of the parasha is that if you come to a city and first, you can't just kill the city, you have to call out in peace. Now, according to many opinions, according to the Rambam, this is when they were coming close to Eretz Israel, they came in peace. And we've said this, they came with three options. Either stay and don't worship idols, leave, or stay and we'll fight you if you want to worship idols anyway. And they chose to stay and fight. So this is where we said that we can't just take their land, you have to, which is not really their land, of course it's our land that was promised to us, but you have to offer them the ability to leave. If they decide to stay and worship idols, then you have to kill them, and you're not allowed to leave anyone alive, because if you do, they're going to eventually make you worship idols, and it's going to be a disaster. Now, last part of the parasha is that it's something called egla arufa. So if a dead body is found in between two cities, so they measure which one of the cities it's closest to, and the city who it's closest to, they have to do what's called the egla arufa. They have to take a calf and chop off the head of the calf. And the reason why they do this, it's a type of a korban, but when they do this, they have to proclaim that we are not guilty of killing this dead body. Now really, the reason why we make them do this whole korban item is because to a degree they are guilty. Because if the dead body was found next to your city, you have some guilt. Now, the Gemara says that it could have happened that you didn't escort the guy out of the city. That means there's a special mitzvah called levaya, that when someone leaves your house, you have to escort them out. In the olden days, it was even more important because you have to make sure the person knows his way and doesn't get killed by pirates. But even today, the halakha is very important to make the person feel important that your friend leaves your house. You don't just let them leave. You walk them out of the house. According to halakha, you have to walk them 4 amot, about 8 feet outside your house to make them feel important. So this could have happened because they didn't walk the guy out of the field. And this is the end of the parasha where they say we're innocent, and we're not guilty. But the point is that they really might be a little guilty. That's why they have to bring this korban of a egla rufa of a city that the dead body was found closest to it. So Parashat Shoftim begins with the subject of Shoftim and Shoterim, the judges and the officers and the rules of the judges. The halakha that an animal cannot have a mum. Halakha that someone who worships idols get killed. The Zakin Mamre, the elder who goes against the ruling of the Bet Din Hagadol, of the Sanhedrin, that person gets killed. The subject of setting up a king and the rules of the king. The king can't be a big shot against the people. He can't have too many horses, too many wives, and too much gold and silver. And he has to always carry the Torah. The Kohanim don't get a part of the city, but they get these gifts: Zeroah l'hayayim and keva, gez, reshit hagez, teruma, and all these things. We saw how you have to be, you can't use the Navi for your own purposes. You have to be wholehearted with Hashem. Don't try to predict the future. And the when you come to the Ir Miklat, the 6 cities of refuge, don't move the fence. Don't do what's called Hasagat Kivul. The concept of Edim Zomemim, false witnesses. When you go to war, don't be afraid. And the subject of one more. When they come to the city, they have to send a warning to the people of the city: leave. Don't just kill them right away. If it's your city that they're living there, you tell them leave. If they don't leave, then you're allowed to fight them. And lastly, the subject of Eglat Rufa, when a dead body is found in between 2 cities. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.